Welcome back to the dopest show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer, this is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but have been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the stupid stuff I did to get put in prison, and I've also got a lot of stories about the crazy stuff that happened while I was in prison, and God forbid you end up in prison. You want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So, I started at low security, 6 months there. Low security, punks, people that persuasion, there wasn't a whole lot of them. It was a little group of them, dozen or so, led by Flamin' Raymond. Yeah, jacked white guy who, dozens of stories about that. He made somebody marry him in a prison marriage to settle a debt. That was a funny one. My first morning waking up in prison, my buddy Fox made friends with him instantly. Prison, it was mostly like dudes 40, 50, 60 years old. Wasn't a whole lot of younger people, and the ones that weren't any good. Fox was about probably 20, in his late 20s. I was about 23 at that time. And I came in there, we became friends quick. He got me in his weightlifting group and everything else. We sit down at breakfast, and this guy at the table next to us says, I like the F in the, so what? And I said, I spit my milk pack in the car. I said, what did he just say? I said, oh, that's Flamin' Raymond. I said, Flamin' Raymond? Like ramen noodle? What? No, Flaming Raymond. It's the homosexual shot caller. I said, oh, that explains everything. But it wasn't as it was pockets and stuff like that, but it wasn't as, out in the open. Okay? Raymond's a chomo too, wasn't any good. That's what he's in prison for. Jack White, you wouldn't have guessed it. You thought that was just tough white dude. You'd have guessed he'd tough and in the mix of everything else. I'm sure he's tough, but anyway, I'll get sent to the medium security. It's a whole different ball game. It's not, the low's not this way, but the medium is. There's not S&Y protection yards. I started at Petersburg, self-surrendered there, spent my whole time there. D.C., Maryland, Virginia, North, South Carolina, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Kentucky. If you're from there, probably go to Petersburg. Good chance. And if you're at a different prison, and you plan on doing the RDAP drug program, which gets you out 18 months early, a year off your sentence plus 6 months halfway house, they'll transfer you to Petersburg to take RDAP. Or the LCP program, which is a religious program that'll get you out 9 months early to a halfway house. So people end up there, for programs. Now about 5-10% were gang dropouts. You see somebody from California, it's a gang member or something like that. They didn't send you to Virginia for no reason. You can look back, you can figure that out. But 40% chomos. So, seeing as how it is, people, it's a whole lot more political at the medium. At the barber shop, there's a white guy from Boston, Rob Banks from what I heard. He cut most of white people's hair. There was a Spanish guy who cut all the Spanish people's hair. Now, Spanish isn't one group. Paisas and Serranos were the only two groups that were allowed for Mexicans at Petersburg. Puerto Ricans is another group. South America as a whole is one group. So that's 4 different groups. Okay? So it's not just, but they had one Spanish guy who cut all their hair. Okay? Then you had like that 4 dudes that was black, and they had different people's hair who they cut. Like one guy was the Muslim's barber, and he had a big beard, you'd tell, and you'd tell by the people that sat, got their hair cut by him. It's just how it works. But now, a lot of these people, they cut certain people's hair. Well, this place has 40% chomos. Who's cutting the chomos' hair? Lily. Lily was a trans person, not a chomo. I tell these stories as respectfully as I can. Don't judge anybody, nothing like that. Better than any other prison channel, I'm going to be as respectful as I can. And something, I never grew up around any of that. Wasn't something I grew up around, saw a whole lot of anything else, but no judgment. But something I will say. In the RDAP drug program, we had probably 3 or so trans people that were in there. One was top-level dope dealer in D.C. One ran drugs across the border for the cartel. And you know this because you're in these small groups, and you got to talk about why you went to prison in these small groups, and you hear this. Most of the ones that were in there were not in there for any type of chomo stuff. And it's not right, it's not fair, I know, but in prison, chomos, any people that persuasion, or alternative lifestyles get lumped in with chomos. It ain't right, it's how it is. Lily was in there from a cruise ship ride in which Lily his partner must have said something wrong. And Lily poked him up, threw him overboard, and got 70 years for it. That was the story. You hear stories about every different person. But trans community as a whole, I don't think they had a chomo. You know, and that's something interesting. So that's something positive I can say, you know, for that. You know, I ain't grow up around anything, but don't judge. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I do have to tell a story, and I try to tell it as best as I can. Now, something that was funny, and I don't care who you are, it's funny. Lily was 6'2", on hormones, everything else, you know. Obviously on hormones, you know, there, all that. 6'2", white, and had a little 5'3", 5'4", 130, 140 pound boyfriend that looked like Kevin Hart. Okay, that was funny to me. You know, little tiny guy. Lily could have shoulder pressed him up. You know, it's funny. And a funny story went with that. Gossip stories get passed around the prison. If something funny happens, you hear about it, even if it doesn't happen in your unit. So this wasn't in my unit, didn't see it. But Lily's boyfriend, little Kevin Hart lookalike, was sitting there watching Love and Hip Hop. And I'm like, oh yeah, look at that one. Oh, she's fat. And they said Lily walked in and said, oh no, you're not disrespecting me like that. And pulled little Kevin Hart fella by his ear to the cell and smacked him up. Which, you know, that's pretty funny. Now, no judgment and everything else, but I will tell you something that did annoy me. And I gotta be honest about it. It made me mad. Okay, I'm in prison. I'm not that persuasive, it just ain't in me. You know, I've got to get dirty magazines, which you're not allowed to have. They have a printing press at the Low security. They print calendars. If you got a calendar on your wall, there's a good chance it came from Petersburg Low. And they get past the mediums. There's all kinds of full color magazines that probably from 20 years old. I mean, they looked like they were older. But I got to hide dirty magazines, risk getting my computer, phone, commissary visits taken. And Lily's counselor knew that the Kevin Hart lookalike and Lily were an item. And put them in the cell together knowing that. If I have to have dirty magazines and everything else, how is that fair? I don't have any outlet. How come y'all, that don't seem fair to me. I mean, if they had, you know, like it was conjugal, something like that you could do for good behavior, they don't have that in the feds. You don't get conjugal visits. You know, conjugal visits your right hand. But anyway, so Lily, by prison slang, would be considered a punk. Lily was a punk, but Lily wasn't no punk. Okay? Lily had a few jobs. One of the jobs that I heard about, and I heard about it from a guy at the Low, if you do something that's dangerous to yourself, if you say something or do something, they put you in a 72-hour psych hold. It does not matter if you're at the Low security, if you're at the camp, or if you're at the medium. The SHU, solitary, there's only one solitary, and it's at the medium security. They put you in a van, they drive you down this little dirt road in between the prisons, and they take you up and they put you in there. Well, he was trying to explain what happened to him, and he wasn't happy about it. If you get put in the psych ward, you get put in a room with nothing. There's not a bed, nothing. You sleep on a steel slab. There's not even a toilet. There's a hole in the floor. And there's also a long window. And behind that window, there has to be somebody to watch you in case you get creative and got to find a way to protect you. Behind that window, there were a couple people that took shifts watching you. And they'd watch you and they'd write down what you did. You know, they'd make notes of it or whatever. And he's telling us about Lily watching him, and everything he did, a note got made of it. For 3 days he had to deal with that. So Lily sits behind, that was one of Lily's jobs, sitting there watching the psych people that it threatened themselves, or, you know, that type of thing. And that was one of the jobs. Okay? So that was one of the things. That's another job figured I'd mention, you know. But anyway, another job on top of that was you get movies in prison Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Usually a new movie, it's out, just came out on DVD, whatever. You get movies every day of December. December, you get a different movie every day. We got Ted in there, is unedited. Sometimes you get the edited versions. The Campaign with Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis, I was really excited to watch it. They gave us a G-rated version of that. Grown men with face tattoos, gang members, and we're watching G-rated movies. God forbid we learn a dirty word. That's silly to me. That's stupid. But sometimes we get the unedited. Ted, we got that. That was good. The Campaign, they ruined that for me. I couldn't even go back and watch it once I got out. It was just, I tried to watch it. It was awful. So they put a poster. It isn't really a poster. It's a piece of paper. But they print out, they copy paste the posters that would be up for those movies. And they print it on that paper. And they staple it to a bulletin board. Lily would go unit to unit and staple the piece of paper on a bulletin board to let you know what movies you had that weekend. They play a different movie Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 3 different movies. They play them different times of the day so each person can get a chance to watch them. There's this fella called Snowflake. He talks like this. He has glasses. And when I first got to Petersburg, I didn't realize it's 40% chum and all that stuff. And this one guy who was like, made friends with, said something about splitting some money, getting a pizza from somebody who made pizzas, because Snowflake worked in the kitchen, made pizzas. We bought a pizza from Snowflake. And I found out later, Snowflake was renting certain services out to people for $5. I got fighting mad over that. I'm a hypochondriac. Ain't no telling what that dude's got. And I just ate a pizza that he made. Ain't no telling what his hands touched before he made that pizza. That made me, I was furious about that. I'm a hypochondriac. If you tell me there's something called hairy black tongue, I'll Google it and I'll have hairy black tongue by the end of the night. That's just how it is. I'm a hypochondriac. I swear, it's awful. There was a thing. I go down the rabbit hole, get a little off topic sometimes, but I went to a rehab and they gave me the wrong person's test results. So basically I had AIDS for about 10 minutes. And they told me I had HIV with a chance of syphilis, like it was cloudy with a chance of rain. And told me we'd talk about it later. I went back in there, threw the papers off the desk, said, "You're going to tell me, we'll talk about it later. You got HIV. Oh, it might be syphilis. We'll talk about it later." I walked in there, threw the papers off the desk, said, "We're going to talk about this now." They kept calling me the wrong name. I said, "If you're going to tell me some news like this, you can at least get my name right." And then it clicked. They gave me a wrong person's results. But for 10 minutes, I had HIV for all of 10 minutes. And it has messed me up ever since. That is back when I was 18 years old. I'm the worst hypochondriac on the planet. I swear, I'm terrible. There was one time I thought I might have had liver disease. I went to jail and I thought, I did all these drugs, I might have liver disease. And I kept poking under my rib until I bruised myself. I thought it felt hard, my liver was hard. I realized I was poking one of my abs. Bruised myself, digging my fingers on it. It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing. But anyway, Snowflake, little cornball dude who rents his services out, tries to be funny. He talks like this. I swear, this is really what he talks like. Like there's no air that can pass through his nose. And he thought he was going to be funny. Now, like I said, Lily was technically a punk, but Lily wasn't no punk. So Snowflake walks in there. Well, Lily goes unit to unit and staples the little poster. Remember, I mentioned it was a piece of paper with the 3 movies you get for the weekend. Lily staples that on every bulletin board in the 12 units on the compound. So Lily went in there, stapled that up. Snowflake decided to grab Lily's chest. Lily beat Snowflake half to death with a stapler. Bad. Wasn't in my unit, but it's a story that gets passed around. A lot of times when people fight, people are like, "Oh shoot, look at that." Apparently everybody's laughing like crazy. Lily is 6'2", 210 pounds. Sometimes people look soft, I guess on the hormones, everything else, have that look. That's some weight to throw around. And I imagine, being in prison, living like that, I imagine there's been a handful of fights, Lily's had to been in. And so that was another particular time that was funny. But the last time, I did burpees every day, so I was friends with a number of people. And anytime I mentioned doing burpees with a AB shot caller, who's a good friend of mine, good guy, My ex, who I thought was wonderful at the time, but turned out to be no good dirty hussy, was black. I showed him pictures of her, and the AB shot caller was very complimentary. Just so you know, it's actually the Aryan Brotherhood guys weren't really bad about that. It was more like the little flunky, independent wannabe white guys that were bad about that. But anyway, so I did burpees with him every day. We did 202 push-up burpees, dirt bags, don't have weights to medium, sewn up bags of dirt, made of khaki sheets that you sewn up, filled with dirt to lift. And we're doing burpees out there. There's a commotion. There's an area that's probably, I don't know, probably about 50 by 50 foot when you first enter the yard. And then there's a fence, and then there's, an opening where you can walk on the yard where it's got the soccer, football, softball fields. So we're in that area. And right towards the opening of that fence, there's a commotion. Lily walks up this dude. This dude's a gang member, and I don't mention people by gangs when I'm talking negatively about stuff. Especially with this stuff happening with that one YouTuber, getting knocked off and everything else for talking crazy stuff. Lily walks up to this guy and says, "If I hear my name has come out of your mouth one more time, I'm gonna knock you out. Then I'm gonna, yeah." And you've heard, everybody's heard people say that in prison, but I've never heard somebody threaten somebody with that. This dude's a gang member. Now, if somebody calls you the B word, says anything to you in a bad type of way, you're expected to do something about it. That gang member, looking up at Lily, just said, "Okay," didn't do nothing. So like I said, Lily's a pump. Lily wasn't a pump. Lily was in there, like I said, for taking somebody's life and doing 70 years. Wasn't getting out. Wasn't going to be treated like that. So, respect, to people, live your own life and everything else. Don't judge people just because they didn't grow up around. And like I said, that community, now, a lot of the open people and a lot of the chomos in there, getting there, and they've got that high energy of deviancy, and they just do it because they just got such a, that. But like the trans people, there were a few of them in the drug unit. The one, Rika, knocked out 3 dudes. Rika's 6'4" and over 200 pounds too. Okay, over a lanky frame. So when people think they look soft or all this, a lot of times those people have had to fight because of who they are, their lifestyle. They have to fight because of it. Rika being from California, I don't believe they allow that out there, which is why Rika got sent there. Probably checked in, jumped, whatever. But imagine there's been a good many fights. But same with Lily, same thing. But yeah, interesting stuff. So I try to tell these stories as respectful as possible. There's no judgment, anything else. Got to tell a story a certain way. But it's an interesting thing because Lily was racking up some money, cutting 40% of the population's hair there. Now, it's not right. People of a certain, lifestyle and chomos get lumped in. That's how it is. It's prison. It's prison. It's how it is. There are different rules in there. It's primitive. It's off, and that's just what it is. But sure, Lily is racking up money. And, yeah, so I try to tell a story as respectful as possible. No disrespect to anybody. Some of these stories I've held back on because I really do want to tell them correctly, not disrespectfully. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Try to be as respectful as possible. So, there it is. I've got a lot more crazy stories like this. And see, something that's interesting, like at Petersburg, there's a lot of crazy stuff like that happened that at the time, they had something called Peter Beach. I'll tell another one on that another day. Some of the craziest things I heard or saw. You don't go out after dark. You don't go out on the yard after dark at Petersburg. The freaks come out at night. Yeah, freaks come out at night. I heard over the loudspeaker one time. Because see, my wall of my building looked over the yard. I didn't look out the window after dark. But you could hear the loudspeaker. And over the loudspeaker, the guard says, "You two, behind the handball court." There's a handball court. It's a giant wall. Okay? So it shields you. Some people at certain times would train box and different stuff behind there. If gangs were going to punish one of their members, they make them stand against it. It's a little privacy, but there's a perimeter car that drives around and sees it. Must have radioed it in. Guard said, "You two behind the handball court, stop. We see what you're doing." Yeah, so there's some crazy stuff that happened, some wild stuff that happened there. Story, time I was like, oh, Lord, but it left me with a bunch of stories. So I tried to be respectful, tell us the best way I could, So, think I did pretty well on this one. If you liked the video, press the like button. If not, I've wasted 20 minutes and 12 seconds of your time, which you'll never get back, but I hope you did. Y'all have a good one.